For almost 2 years, she did everything right. Cut the sugar, took the medication on time, walked after dinner 3 times a week, ate the salads, skipped the bread at lunch, measured her portions. And every morning she walked to that machine on the kitchen counter, and the number looked back at her like it hadn't noticed any of it, like none of it had happened. She told me she started to wonder if her body had simply decided to stop listening, if this was just what the rest of her life looked like, a number that wouldn't move, a machine that confirmed it, and a quiet, growing fear that she was running out of things to try. I'm 83. I don't hold my breath when I check my number in the morning. I move well, I sleep through the night, I have days that are full and useful and mine. And the evening habit I stopped, something I had been doing for years without realizing it was working against everything else I did right, is what I'm going to tell you about today. Because here's what nobody explained to either of us. Not in the appointments, not in the pamphlets, not in any of the advice about eating less sugar and moving more. The fasting number you see in the morning is not a report card for yesterday's lunch. It's the result of something that happens while you're unconscious, between 2 and 4 in the morning. And one completely ordinary evening habit, something millions of people do without a second thought, is quietly feeding that process every single night. I'm going to name it. I'm going to explain exactly why it works against you. And I'm going to tell you what to do instead. Not a list of things to add, not a supplement, not another thing to buy, one thing to stop. Stay with me, because the part that connects what you do in the last hour before bed to the number you see 6 hours later, that connection is not what you think. Her name was Helen, 76 years old, retired librarian from a small town outside of Memphis. 18 years with a type 2 diagnosis. Meticulous woman, kept a food journal. Her dinners were genuinely careful, grilled chicken, vegetables, reasonable portions. But every evening around 9, after the dishes were done and the television was on, she had a small bowl of crackers or a piece of toast, or sometimes just a handful of the cereal she kept on the counter because she'd heard whole grain was safe. Just something light, just a little something before bed. She had been doing it for years. It felt harmless. It felt like nothing. It was, in fact, the one thing that was undoing everything else she did right. Here's the mechanism, and I want you to understand this clearly, because once you do, you'll never look at that evening snack the same way. When you eat a fast-digesting carbohydrate, crackers, toast, white rice, a sweet piece of fruit, cereal, even something labeled whole grain that digests quickly, without protein or fiber alongside it, your blood sugar rises. This is not a surprise. You know carbohydrates raise blood sugar. But what matters here is the timing and what happens next. Research has shown that a carbohydrate eaten without protein or fiber, especially in the evening, produces a glucose spike that can persist for 2 to 3 hours. 2 to 3 hours. So if you eat crackers at 9 o'clock, your blood sugar is still elevated at 11, still elevated at midnight, and it is heading into the overnight hours carrying that elevated load. Now, between 2 and 4 in the morning, something happens in your body that very few people ever hear explained. Your brain begins signaling for waking. Cortisol starts to rise. Growth hormone activates. These are not signs of anything wrong. They are your biology preparing you to function. But as part of that preparation, your liver receives a signal. Release stored glucose. Fuel the day ahead. Research has described this window as a normal biological process. In a younger body, in a body where insulin receptors respond cleanly, the glucose gets cleared efficiently and the morning number stays controlled. But in a body managing blood sugar after 60, in a body where the insulin receptor handshake has become unreliable, the glucose from that liver release sits longer, clears more slowly. And the more glucose that is already circulating when that window opens, the glucose that's still there from the 9 o'clock crackers, the higher the starting point. The higher the number the liver is amplifying from. This is the part nobody connects. Not because it's a secret, because connecting it requires a conversation that takes longer than a standard appointment allows. Your doctor is not hiding this from you. They have 8 minutes. This takes longer than 8 minutes. Helen's evening crackers weren't raising her fasting glucose at 9 o'clock. They were raising it at 5 in the morning. The glucose from that small bowl was still shaping what her liver did in the dark while she slept, and she had no idea. For 18 years, no one had named it. Drop your fasting number in the comments. The number you saw this morning or the one you've been watching sit in the same range for months. I read every one. You do everything right. You eat clean, you take your pills, and the next morning that number is still too high. I know that frustration. I lived it for years. They never tell you about the morning rise, your sugar climbing while you sleep, no matter what you did the day before. You wake up, you test, and it feels like the work didn't count, like you're stuck depending on more and getting nowhere. I was done feeling powerless. I didn't want to throw out my doctor's plan. I wanted something natural and simple I could add to it, something that finally moved that morning number. I'll walk you through what changed it for me, and the natural support I add every day is in the free presentation linked below. The mistake is this: ending the evening with fast-digesting carbohydrate alone, without protein, without fat, without fiber to slow it down in the 2 to 3 hours before sleep. Not dinner. Dinner is not the problem. The problem is what comes after dinner. The crackers during the television show, the piece of toast before bed, the bowl of cereal that feels like nothing, the sweet fruit eaten alone at 9 or 10 o'clock. These foods, eaten without a buffer, produce a glucose rise that enters the overnight hours unresolved, and that unresolved glucose is what the dawn phenomenon amplifies into the number you see in the morning. Stopping this one habit costs nothing. Nothing to buy, nothing to add, just the recognition that the last thing entering your body before sleep should not be fast carbohydrate eaten alone. If you're hungry in the evening, that hunger is real and it deserves an answer. The answer is not crackers. The answer is a small portion of protein, a few slices of turkey, a spoonful of peanut butter, a handful of walnuts, half a cup of cottage cheese. These foods digest slowly, they don't spike. They enter the overnight hours quietly, providing a steady metabolic signal instead of a glucose surge for the liver to work with. For Helen, the change was simple. She stopped the crackers. On nights she was genuinely hungry, she had a small bowl of cottage cheese instead, about half a cup, enough to satisfy without spiking. The cottage cheese provided slow-digesting protein that moved through her system across several hours, not 2. And research has shown that this kind of slow-digesting protein before sleep sends a different message to the liver during those overnight hours, not a signal of an empty, fasting body that needs emergency glucose production, but a signal of a body that is still gently fed. At week 3, her fasting glucose had dropped 14 points. At week 6, it was down 21 from where it had been. Same medication, same endocrinologist. One evening habit, stopped. Talk to your doctor before adjusting anything around your medication schedule. That conversation matters, especially if your timing and food interact. But stopping a late-night fast-carb snack is something most people can discuss openly with their care team and hear nothing but agreement. Now, stopping the evening mistake addresses the glucose load entering the overnight window. But the overnight window itself, the dawn phenomenon, the liver release between 2 and 4 in the morning, also responds to 2 other habits. And if you only stop the snack without these, you're fixing one side of the mechanism. The first is a 10-minute walk after dinner. Not exercise in any demanding sense, movement. Because the moment your muscles begin moving, even slowly, they activate a glucose pathway that does not need insulin at all. Research has shown that a short walk after dinner clears a meaningful amount of glucose from the blood before sleep, reducing what the liver has to amplify overnight. The evening mistake was feeding the overnight window. The walk drains it. The second is sleep itself, its consistency and its quality. Research has documented that a single night of disrupted sleep can increase insulin resistance the following morning. One night. Your morning number on a bad sleep night is not random. Cortisol spikes earlier, stays elevated longer, and the liver receives a stronger signal to release. A consistent bedtime, the same time every night, and a cool room between 65 and 68 degrees protect the sleep quality that your fasting number depends on more than most people realize. Stop the evening snack. Walk 10 minutes after dinner. Sleep at the same time in a cool room. These 3 habits target the same overnight window from 3 different directions, and together they change what that machine shows you in the morning. I want to say something before we close, something I think you need to hear. You've been carrying this number for a long time, And somewhere along the way, after enough adjustments, enough appointments, enough mornings of watching the machine confirm that nothing changed, you may have started to feel like the effort wasn't worth it anymore. Like your body had stopped being a partner and become something you just managed, something you worked around. I know what that does to a person. Not just the frustration of the number, what it does to everything around it. The way it makes you careful at the dinner table when you're with your grandchildren, measuring and watching while everyone else just eats. The way it sits in the back of your mind when you're planning to visit someone, when you're thinking about a trip, wondering if your body will cooperate, wondering if you're becoming a burden instead of just someone who shows up. The quiet fear of needing more help than you want to need, of the people you love having to rearrange themselves around what you can and can't do. That fear is real, and I'm not going to tell you it disappears overnight. But I am going to tell you this. The mechanism I described today is real. It responds. Your liver is not broken, it is following signals, and signals can change. The glucose you stop sending into the overnight window is glucose the liver doesn't get to amplify. The number that comes down is not just a number. It is evidence that your body is still listening, that the effort still lands, that you are not out of time. It is not too late to see a different number on that machine. It is not too late to feel like your body is working with you again. And it is not too late to live the kind of mornings that free you up for everything else. The people, the plans, the ordinary days that feel like enough. If you watched this whole thing, you're not the type who gives up. You're the type who keeps looking for a real answer. So let me be straight with you. The morning number isn't your fault, and it isn't just diabetes. It's the dawn rise, and it responds to the right daily habits. The goal was never to quit your treatment. It was to support it naturally so you finally see that number move and feel in control again. Alongside the steps I showed you, I take a simple, natural support every day to help keep my blood sugar in a healthy range. Affordable, easy, and it works with my doctor's plan, not against it. The free presentation is in the description below. Go see it for yourself. And keep your doctor in the loop. This is support, not a replacement. If this video finally names something you've been living with for years, subscribe. There's more coming.